Thanks everybody for jumping on and joining us. We are recording the session, so that will be available after. Unifying Sales Dev and RevOps in a remote setting. I'm joined today by Scott Logan, VP of Marketing over Kronologic, and Ben Parker, COO at Kronologic. Thanks for joining us, guys. We're really excited to dive in on the topic.
Likewise, so are we. As a marketing leader and ops leader, thankfully we're on the same page here, but we'll share how to get everyone else on the same page as well moving forward. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. We'll dive right in.
Very excited to be here, David. As we were talking about, this is my leadership career started in SDR management, and so this is a topic and an audience near and dear to my heart. Hopefully, packing these next few minutes with some value.
Absolutely. So again, what we're talking about is how to, as a sales leader, inside sales leader, sales dev leader, to get the RevOps on board with your vision for driving more pipeline. You see, and your issues are tangible to you, but and to your team. But how do you get those to come to life? So Ben and I obviously have a career full of working with each other in these specific scenarios at different companies, and now at Kronologic. So what we're going to do is share our insight on the challenges of being a change agent, why RevOps objects to better ideas, how to build your case, and then how to pitch idea and make it all come together and come to life. So let's dive right in. As a demand gen leader who's ran SDR teams, been a part of an SDR team early in my career, you see these challenges like hit you in the face over and over and over. And if you're one who wants to take initiative and figure this out to make your life easier and the team, you often will go and find that solution. Well, when you find that solution, you tell your team, and they absolutely love it because, of course, they see the world through your lens as well. So you're super jazzed up, but you really haven't done this a whole lot, or maybe you have, and there's been different circumstances than you are in today. So you say, all right, now I need to go get the right people on board on how to implement this. So you jump over to the RevOps side and you pitch, the director or the VP or someone over there who you're connected to, and something different happens than what happened with the pitch to your team. And Ben, I'll let you take it from here.
Yeah, sure. So anybody in the audience that has gone through this before probably had a similar experience to something that a co-founder of mine actually did. Took an idea to a RevOps counterpart, came to the idea, was spilling, and basically the guys very politely gave the impression that yeah, go figure that out a little bit more, and then we can talk about it. Even if you come with a more well-defined process and proposal, it can be really tough and frustrating to get the RevOps team to buy in. Now, there are a number of reasons for that. We're going to get into a lot of those, but right off the top of the bat, comp usually is different for operations personnel than it is for revenue personnel. They are usually focused on completely different elements of the business. And additionally, things can sound like they might be duplicating processes or other solutions. I would say those are probably the two most frequent reasons that I would cite. Kind of going back to the potentially duplicative nature of a certain technology, the landscape out there for tools, the tech stack landscape, especially for sales development, is noisy. Part of the revenue operations team is to have their pulse on this industry as well. But one of the challenges is how fast each segment within this industry is growing. Now, a really diligent RevOps counterpart is likely to have met with a third to half of these and understand their value propositions and who they play with pretty well. So a tool popping up, they may have already vetted them, or it might be something that sounds so close to something else, they think it's probably worth their time to just move on. And then Scott, if you can go to the next slide. This slide that you can barely actually make out because of how intense it is the same people that are in charge of managing the SDR tool stack are very, very frequently the same people in charge of managing the MarTech tool stack. That last slide was just the SDR tool stack. This slide is just the marketing tech stack that is available as of a year ago, right? And at the rate of increase, you know, there's probably a whole other island on this map that has popped up in this time frame. So it's an extremely challenging thing. The last piece here is because of all that research, because of all the constraints that they've taken into account when building a tech stack. Let's be honest, there's no pride in there. They've built a stack. It's their baby. They have invested long nights, arduous weekends, fights with a significant other over how much attention they're giving them, all just to make the stack at least function most of the time in one direction. And you're coming in, and while you're not saying this, they might hear, "Hey, your baby's kind of ugly. I think we want to slap some lipstick on this," right? And as a starting point, that can be kind of tough.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you avoid this? How do you get into a situation where everyone loves the idea as much as you? And having been in this world a lot and been shot down more times than I've been approved on, like, six-figure type changes or adjustments or additions to what I think the demand gen team needs, I've learned a few things. And one of the things is getting that executive sponsorship right away. And you may think, well, my team likes it, my manager likes it, so let's go and just bring everyone together in a kickoff call and we can pitch to them why this is so amazing. And that's great until you run into the same situation that Ben was just talking about. And maybe even marketing gets involved. Now you have two people who have emotionally connected to this tech stack that they've built, and they're like, why don't you just do a better job? And there's just that confidence that you have. So now you're like, all right, well, now I need to bring for this next project, and this is me saying you, I'm really close with the director of RevOps and with the director of sales, and let's go and get them on board. Well, now you have a situation that you go into that meeting, you have two champions on the other side, they're going to go to battle with you, and remember the go to battle part, and you pitch it, and then the head of RevOps or the head of marketing still comes down, and you turn to your counterparts that are your peers, and they're silent. Because the last thing they want to do is push back against their boss, who is the leader of their team. And all of a sudden, you've got a bad, awkward environment where even if you call them out, they are now feeling uncomfortable that they have put themselves unknowingly into a bad spot with this. So the way to go about it is actually meeting with all the executive peers and all the peers, your director level peers, leaders, one-on-one beforehand. And you address them with the second column here, as in, here's a challenge I'm facing. Here's what's in it for me. Here's why I feel this needs to happen. And if you know what's in it for them, if you know what they're goaled off of already, you can start to apply it, some leading questions as to how it would help them, and then let them take you down that road. If you don't, just straight up say, I don't necessarily know how this benefits you or what your goals are, because what I really want to do is have this solution help both of us out. And when you go in and you've done that with everybody, you may think, well, then what's the point of the meeting? Well, now you're creating a meeting structure where everybody's on the same team and you already know everybody's question, and you've probably had time to go back and get the answers to any questions you weren't able to answer. So I relate this back to any argument I have with my wife. At some point during the discussion, she says, don't you know that I'm never going to ask you a question that I don't already know the answer to? And that's essentially what you're creating here, which is probably why I always lose every internal battle at the house. So then I'll let you take it from here for the business case.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think you touched on something that's really important, and there's just two things I would add to it. One, and it's kind of that middle point right there. I've always tried to make it a point to understand how those adjacent to me in the go-to-market strategy. So when I was an SDR leader, I knew my metrics because I know my metrics, but I want to know the marketers that are feeding me. I want to know their KPIs and if they'll share them, their MBOs. And then the people that I hand off, so inside sales managers. Whenever we would get a new sales manager, or if I inherited a new territory, something like that, I made it a point to sit with each one of the managers in this new territory and understand specifically exactly what their goals were and what their comp was tied to. That will save you a lot of heartache right out of the gate. You will know what people are likely to jump on. You will know what they are likely to despise right from that part in and of itself. The last piece there that I just wanted to elaborate on a little bit, Scott, was when you share this kind of early stage pitch, right? We're not talking a full-blown business case, but hey, I found this new solution. It's really interesting. I think it's going to solve some problems we have. When you're having that conversation one-on-one, people are much more likely to not only give you candid feedback, but jump in with the things that make it personal to them. And so they will begin to see themselves in some little form or fashion in this broader mission, thereby increasing the likelihood that this actually gets that groundswell needed to push the change. And the last piece here is what we were talking about. It's building a strong business case. On the general principles of a strong business case are, is this even potential for high ROI? A good way to answer that is answer the first question. Is this solving an expensive problem? If those two are not there, it's probably not going to happen. And then one that I've seen at previous employers, and then we see today, and then we see in our customers all the time, especially from the RevOps team, is does this solution have the potential to go broader than just a few teams? Can I take this geo-wide? Can I take this global? For some companies, if the answer to can I take this global is no, that's where the conversation stops right there. So it's important to know, kind of what the company priorities are there. Scott, if you can go to the next slide. We're not going to go through every single one of these, but the reason this is up here is we're going to get into crafting a business case, a fast business case that you can use at the speed of business. But the way that I've always thought of building business cases and been coached myself and coached anybody that was in my org to build business cases is approach it in phases, right? You don't want to commit an entire weekend or an entire afternoon or an entire evening to building a business case if it's ultimately doomed, before it ever got out of the first meeting. So you want to approach in phases, and we have kind of all the major check boxes in each one of those phases outlined here. And then for the real gold star seeking people in the audience, I've linked in the bottom there, kind of the perfect version of a business case that has been on the Project Management Institute's website for a while now. It's kind of like what McKinsey or KPMG would recommend to build a business case. It's definitely a kill for trying to propose a pilot in like an SDR organization. But if that's something you want to do later in your career, it never hurts to take a look at, what the pinnacle looks like.
Yeah. So let's dive in. What does this look like in real life? It's easy to talk about, so let's talk about it in the sense of an SDR world. And thankfully for us in this scenario, is our solution is directly aligned to sales teams. So we'll walk you through oftentimes what we go through with our champions as they build out their business case to say, hey, does Kronologic make sense for us? And what is the value that it can bring, and make sure it makes sense? Because honestly, from our side too, if it doesn't make sense for you, we don't want to push you into something that is to ultimately fail and look bad on both of us. So that's why another reason why you'd want to go through this process. The pain point here for us is solving the last mile problem. So we'll talk to someone about their connection between the putting a lead from an event on or from a show or any lead source onto a calendar. We relate it to last mile because it's easy to ship a plane full of goods from, say China to Atlanta, but then taking that huge freight load of goods and putting it on a whole bunch of different trucks with different people and delivering it to each house, that's a whole lot more expensive and takes a lot more work. Same thing here. If you have a trade show or you have a webinar that has a ton of people, that one vehicle drove a truckload of leads to you, and now how do you get each one of those people on all the different sales reps' calendars? And that's the issue that we would dive into with them and break down the lead sources. And that's part of the global component. Like, is this one point solution for one use case, or could it be used all the way through customer success, account management, and parts of the business? So again, we address this with the sales leaders with that. Then we go and have our one-on-one meetings with the ops leaders here. And we say, okay, so here's what you have built and here's where we stand, but there's still an issue where this beautiful piece of work where a handful of people can automate, track, score, append, and process thousands of leads a day or hour is fantastic. But then you get to the spot where there is some breakdowns, even with the automation that we put for sales engagement, it's still 10 actions per lead over 14 days to get connected to someone. And then once you're connected with them, you have to then manually go back and forth and talk to them and try and get a meeting accepted on the calendar. And so we're still saying, this is the most fantastic machine that you've built for us. We appreciate it. We couldn't get to where we're at. But now that we're here, we're still seeing this gap. And we align that to say, let's just take it the next step because I think I found something.
And Scott, just one thing I want to jump in,
Sure.
just to highlight on that last slide. It's super important when talking to the revenue ops counterpart, even more so than like a senior sales leader or senior marketing leader, to explain why, even though you've created this beautiful tech stack and it is achieving broad missions in the company, there is still this gap, and nothing that we have in that tech stack is address that gap. Part of why that's important, yes, there's the pride component. Yes, there's just general practices around not double spending on solutions that are duplicates of each other. But there are frequent MBOs for people who are in charge of running these tech stacks that are based around efficiency, and most importantly, efficiency of spend. So anything that's perceived as doing a duplicate function is automatically going to fall to the bottom. That's doing a slide like this is super important when trying to get the RevOps team on board.
Yep. And there may be even a slide that they've already built that you could utilize to build your case off of. And so now you're talking to the business leaders, the CRO, the CSO, the CMO, because they care about investment and return on that investment and the impact on revenue. So we have an exercise that we call value per meeting. We calculate basically how they're driving and forecasting their pipeline today and tell them how this conversion works with those numbers. And then you basically get a $2,700 worth of revenue per meeting based on your conversion rates. So now we have a dollar value per meeting, and most SDR teams track the number of meetings booked and know those rates. And so now you can say, okay, let's look at last year. You had 3,000 qualified leads come through, and you book 300 meetings out of it, 10%. That's pretty good. Maybe an average, maybe you're a little bit higher, maybe you're a little bit lower. But the gap there is 7.2 million. Now, we're not saying that you're going to, those 2,700 leads that are worth 7.2 million, that you could even get all of that. But say that your solution, which ours does, gets 5, 10, 15, 20, 25% additional conversion rate, where you can grab a huge chunk of that 7 million, and like 10, 20% can get you over that next year's quota, and with really without making many large-scale headcount changes. That's the approach we take to connect to the dollars. And if you can do a similar motion, I would really suggest it, because that really talks to how do we get more out of what we're doing today, which I think is where most people try to go. So now that you have everyone emotionally, 3 groups, your sales team, the marketing and RevOps team, and the leadership team on board and emotionally connected to their goals, you can pitch the solution. So we say, we take this calendar first methodology and we automate it, and it sends the calendar invite as a prepackaged message to take those people who are engaged with a certain lead score, or however you get people into a sales dev motion, and we just put the meeting invite in a very structured textual way so that they know what they're getting. They know what the meeting's going to deliver with an agenda. They know why it's connected to them. They didn't have to wait to get an SDR call. They didn't have to wait to get an SDR email. We can use those for nurturing still. You're just putting that meeting invite at the moment that they are engaged, and it's never a situation where it's like, I don't remember downloading that, because it's at the moment of download and it's addressing what they're researching at that moment. So, and it's all automated and it scales. So it solves that scaling problem. And then you go into, that was the sales side. Now you go into the operations side and say, here, this wouldn't be possible without your tech stack. This wouldn't be possible without you building this machine for us to plug into in order to keep this train moving at the clip that you've engineered it to. I'm just taking that last part with this idea, or we are, and finishing the automation component to where instead of diving right into the engagement platform, it dives into this calendar first automation, gets those people to click the meeting invite right out the gate at the right moment with the right context. And then if they decline or they don't respond, now you start to go into this nurturing sales motion. And when they engage again, then they get kicked back, and you all of a sudden have a situation where SDRs aren't logging into anything extra. They're not having to do anything besides manage their calendar the way they normally were, and meetings, just accepted meetings, pop onto their calendar from that motion. So before I dive into the next one, that kind of in a very fast forward motion gets you through those steps. And we didn't want to dive too far into it because it would, I think you understand it from the setup. However, there's one thing that we didn't bring up, and one thing will really be the secret weapon towards getting your project approved. And that's taking the additional initiative to experiment on your own or in a very small controlled setting with someone from the other side, even to experiment with no cost, with no pilot program, with nothing. You just say, in this situation, let's take these tailored invites, take these 50 leads from these different sources and different use cases, and let's just send a calendar invite the way that calendar first methodology suggests we do it, and see if conversion rates increase. That's honestly what I did before I joined when I was looking at this, and the conversion rates did increase. And so then I took that data and pushed forward. And so Ben, maybe you could double click on the importance of that extra, or how rare that may be.
Yeah, absolutely. So just backing up a second here. So all that we've seen so far are like real slides that we've either helped clients create or whatever in building a business case. But you follow the same technique in building a business case for any tool that you want to use. What Scott has just kind of transitioned into is away from initial problem statement vision cast into specific application within the company and how it plays with us. And now he's transitioning into truly rarefied air, which is, hey, I understood the basic principles of this technological solution to be X, Y, and Z. I wanted to see if I manually apply those principles on my own, does it even hint that the principles are right and we should consider moving forward? What's on the screen is a real test that Scott really did, essentially within his first 2 weeks at Kronologic, to ensure himself that he wasn't crazy for joining and signing up for this wild ride. And he was able to blow his previous like best in class tech stack results out of the water. And so how this applies to someone asking for budget. When I was in a larger operations organization at a previous employer, we would get asked frequently, hey, have you heard about this? What do you think about implementing that? And it happens with such high frequency, and it is usually so divorced from your own internal comp that it does become overwhelming. If someone has taken the time to actually just test out the principles just a little bit and be able to show that the principles seem to stand, I am immediately much more receptive to really diving in and seeing like, okay, how can we get to a proof point with as little exposure as possible? And that's kind of where we tie together in the last two slides of the business case.
Yep, exactly. So Again, going back to how can this expand and benefit more of the company as opposed to just your small little segment of the company? How can it, in this case, tie to additional lead sources? Well, here's some data from our customers that of a sampling of an average of what they're seeing based on the normal, and you could use this for your use case trial data where you're just doing this ad hoc, and or work with the vendor to find out if they have data sets that can help support this. And then in the last column here, we did an average percentage increase on the last mile gap of what revenue is left on the table, and even with a small 14% average increase, that is completely attainable with our customers. Our prospects can now say $1 million could be attributed to this in closed won, not even in pipeline, just in closed won. So that ROI is absolutely there, and many people are going to listen to that.
And then this last slide. So if you're going for approval, right? So we talked about phases. You could share all of the previous slides kind of piecemeal in your one-on-one conversations, as well as in kind of that stakeholder alignment session. When you're going for I need an executive to stand up and sponsor this thing so that we can really take this into finance and ops and the broader revenue operations team. This is the money slide, because the question that ops leader is almost always, especially that finance leader is almost always going to ask is, what's it cost? What can I get? And what is the minimum amount I can expose to prove whether or not I should bet big on this? And so, again, if the gold star students in the audience, if you jump in and go to that like McKinsey version of a business case, like this is slides, this is 20 slides. Please don't feel the need to do that. You got to operate at this business. You got to operate at something that can move stuff in the very near term. And so what we try to provide is, hey, this is estimated cost in license fee plus management. This is what we stand to gain. And I always try to provide a range. Because at this point in any vetting, no one can tell you exactly what that ROI is going to be. And then the most important piece is give them the total exposure to get to a proof point. If, in the case that we built here, it's like 6K, like most people are going to have that in discretionary, and you will have a really good estimation of, hey, is this big enough to warrant further investment or not from minimal exposure there. The left side of the screen is something that early in my career, personally, I didn't understand my leadership was actually looking to me for. First management role ever, I just didn't want to screw anything up. What they were actually looking for was someone who's going to take ownership and make strong recommendations based on doing their homework. And so if you've gotten to this point, do not be shy. Put your recommendation in there, include recommended next actions, share that with the stakeholder, the executive you're trying to get to say, yes, rock and roll. Share that in kind of one-on-one beforehand. Give them the opportunity to poke a hole or two in that private setting before you take it larger. And I have found that most executives will take those recommendations, or at the very least have a good and full discussion around, why they should or should not move forward.
Yep. And I'm glad we chose this topic, because talking about always learning along the way, and some of those examples I shared are real deal examples, like when my wife is always right and when I didn't talk to all the right people before the meeting. This is something I learned. I had never built this years to gain or investment to gain total exposure. I'd not built that model before. So I now have that in my arsenal, which I didn't. So thank you, Ben, for educating me on that component. So that's the end of where we're at for presentation wise. And I was full screen, so I wasn't able to get to all the questions as we go through here. But if there are any Q&As, we can address them now if you're open to stay on the line a little bit. Yes, we will absolutely share the deck. What if you are a sales dev rep and you want to address without being a leader? How does this process change if you're not a leader? Ben, you want to take that?
I would say it changes, but not dramatically. The principles are all still the same. If you're an individual contributor, that does not mean that you cannot be a change agent. You absolutely can. The challenge with being an individual contributor is just by the very nature of being an individual contributor, you tend to have more limited situational awareness than your boss's boss, et cetera, et cetera. So probably the safest way to do this would be, especially if you're tenured, 100%, just go to your boss and say, hey, like, we need to talk about this. This could solve a real problem in the business. If you're not tenured, it might help to ask around the campfire a little bit. Hey, does anybody else have this problem? What are we doing about it? If you will probably find that the answer might be like, oh, well, we're not really doing anything about it. At that point, in your next one-on-one, it would be wise to come with maybe a slide or two, or at least a formulated argument as to why it warrants further exploration, this tool that's interesting you, that has caught your eye, and have that conversation in a one-on-one setting. People are always more willing to be their true selves and either support you or tell you what landmines to watch out for in a one-on-one setting over a group setting.
Good. I'm going to keep throwing these at you because you're one that we're going to have to convince from the marketing and sales side. So if you've been shot down by Angry Ben in the past,
it's happened.
You're going back again. What's the best way to repair that previously failed experiment?
So I'm going to give a cop-out answer, and then I'll give a real answer. Okay. Cop-out answer is try not to damage the relationship in the first place, and the way to do that is by not taking the first rejection personally. I swear to you, while ops people can sometimes seem a little prickly and a little curmudgeonly, they generally are not like mean people or anything. They are stressed. And not only that, there's actually a set of formulas that are used to determine whether or not to make large investments. So especially if you're asking for a relatively large ticket item, they are running a very stringent process on that. And at the end of the day, it comes out to a math equation that meant the other options on the table at the time seemed to have a higher internal rate of return. That's it. Like it's usually not a personal decision. That said, if that's not the case, the relationship had been damaged in the past, or we're living in that world and now we've got to move forward. The best defense is a good offense through preparation and stakeholder and stakeholder management. I can't stress this enough. It sucks. It's the way the world kind of works sometimes. If you are a frontline SDR manager or an individual contributor, you need to have an executive sponsoring a mission. And here's exactly why. As an ops leader, not only my base, but like whether or not I continue to work at the company, let alone whether or not I hit my MBOs, is almost exclusively determined by what large scale projects that the C-suite or senior president suite has handed to my unit get delivered, and if they get delivered on time and within the budget. And so the kind of proclivity for me to say, yes, relatively junior person in the company, I'm going to drop the CEO's project and I'm going to grab this. It's a tough argument. It's a really tough argument. So I would just say the executive stakeholder and really making sure that try to get as multi-threaded as possible through the executive stakeholder. Selfishly, I'll use the Kronologic example. Marketing leaders and sales leaders usually both win when Kronologic gets deployed. And so I will say it is a total strategy of ours that when we're building a business case with a champion within a company, we are trying to get both a senior sales leader, a VP or higher sales leader, and a VP or higher marketing leader, because we know that's the kind of clout it's going to take to move the needle with revenue operations. Yeah.
And another thing I'll just add on a personal note is have some humility. Say, last time I pitched you an idea, you were right. It wasn't really the right timing. Or if you don't agree and you think it was right, you could say, I actually learned more about your process. I learned more about the way you look at things from that last project. So I'm coming to you in good faith that I'm taking whatever you did learn, like actually state out the process change that you learned or the math equation that they stated to you that you learned, bring that to the table and say thank you. And then actually apply that to the next time you go around. And it's hard to not at least seriously entertain a discussion about something like an improvement to the business, which everybody's job is, when you've just said, hey, you helped advance my understanding of the business and how you work, and they will more likely hear you out. So that just on a more person-to-person note, I would suggest that.
That's great wisdom, you guys. Thank you so much for sharing with us and giving us the tools. I mean, sometimes you can't do it alone. You need tools, you need services, and we have a tendency to try to, just do it ourselves. Sometimes you've got to have that support and to be able to put the tools in action to help you reach your goals. And so we got some great notes here to improve that process. So thank you.
Thanks for having us, David. Audience, thank you for engaged and asking great questions. Scott, thank you for being an awesome presenting partner at MC. This was fun.
You said it best.
And I don't know if you guys are still going to be over at the Kronologic virtual booth for a few minutes after this, but if folks want to stop by, either stop by the booth or head over to Kronologic website and get on the calendar with these guys. They know calendars for sure. And then we got one more session coming up here with Justin Michael over in the main stage. So we'll see you over there. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, everybody.